There used to be a direct flight not too long ago from Ogdensburg to Philadelphia. An actual jet with a pressurized cabin. It seated about 30 people or so. One flight attendant, a pilot, and a co-pilot. I counted 7 passengers aboard the flight I was on. We were in the air for less than an hour when I started to see a concentration of concrete and those rectangular docks protruding out into the Delaware River, and we started to descend. From the airport, I took a train downtown. I saw City Hall, the Liberty Bell, and walked on those tiny, tiny colonial streets. I even triumphantly jogged up those iconic steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, not unlike, well, like Rocky would have, you know. That Sunday, I was a pulpit guest at First Unitarian in Philadelphia, and then in the afternoon, I was waiting at the gate to depart, and this guy walked right up to me as if he knew me and asked, "So, are you from Potsdam?" I said, "No, Canton." I could smell alcohol on his breath. He told me he had studied with Jill Savage. From his slurred speech, I didn't know if it was violin or viola. He had a long layover and apparently spent most of that time in a bar. Though I was annoyed by his oversharing, he seemed rather harmless. When we got into the plane, I counted 6 other passengers, all sitting together in the first few rows. I sat behind the talkative person with slurred speech. Across the aisle from me, I met a man from Prescott, Ontario, who regularly flies to Philadelphia to play in a bagpipe band. Anyways, the happy drunk noticed the flight attendant, who was a very attractive young woman. He was asking her where she lived. She showed him a ring. He didn't believe that she was married. Her body language was clearly stating she was not interested. He asked where she'd be staying that night in Ogdensburg. When she didn't answer, he asked, "Is it Grand View? I know there are not too many hotels in Ogdensburg. I can meet up with you later." It was getting really gross. I looked around and nobody was saying or stepping in. I tried to think of something to say, and out came the question, "Hey dude, are you familiar with the term sexual harassment?" "This is not sexual harassment," he roared back to me. "You are crossing a line." "No, I didn't." Then he turned to the Canadian bagpiper and asked him loudly, "Am I sexually harassing the flight attendant?" "I'm not sure how you define sexual harassment in this country," he escaped and avoided. That coward. "Look," I said, "I'm the one who's sober here, and I'm telling you, this is sexual harassment. She is obviously not interested in you, and you are creeping her out." He stopped. Before touching down in Ogdensburg, the flight attendant passed by the Canadian bagpiper and gave him a fist bump. On the way out of the plane, as the flight attendant was smiling at everyone and shaking their hands and thanking them for flying her airline, I said, "Hey, I was the one who spoke up." She looked at me with desperate but grateful eyes. And I wondered how many times she was harassed. She said, "Thank you," gave me a fist bump. I was on Facebook a few weeks ago and came across a post by the Reverend Peter Morales, former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. He said, "I'm appalled and amazed at the cowardice of people in public life. The refusal to speak about things you believe to be wrong. We are seeing this daily, but I've seen it dozens of times in my own life. And though I have often been outspoken, I too have kept silent when I should have said something. What are the deep sources of moral cowardice? What are the deep sources of moral courage? I suspect courage comes from a profound love and strong connection to family, friends, faith, ideals, community. I suspect the cowardice we see is one result of the disconnection of so many in modern life. A culture of individualism. What is it that triggers that feeling of, I can no longer remain silent? And then the now retired minister concluded, worth a sermon for sure. Trump has been looking for revenge. His administration has been punishing democratic institutions that appear to lean to the left. The law firm Paul Weiss was attacked by an executive order that threatened to bar their lawyers from federal courts. This executive order had no legal merit to it. Instead of unifying with other law firms and perhaps suing, the elite law firm capitulated and committed itself to pro bono services for right-wing causes advanced by the White House. According to the New York Times, this agreement may have saved the law firm $2.6 billion in business. By the way, the senior partners of Paul Weiss make $20 million a year. And now some of the biggest and most elite law firms are now unwilling to take pro bono immigration cases for fear of retaliation from the Trump administration. Courage is difficult. I was energized when I heard that Harvard was standing up to the Trump administration. Harvard President Dr. Alan Garber has been hailed as a defender of academic independence. If any institution could afford to have courage, you think it would be Harvard. Harvard has been around since before we were a country. They have $53 billion in their endowment, though most of it is restricted. The Harvard president, Garber, who is Jewish, modified policies to combat anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism claims by the Trump administration have become basically smoke screens to attack liberal institutions. President Garber limited protests, stopped giving out public statements on issues that did not directly affect the university, and no longer required written commitment to diversity statements from professors. Harvard was already moving in the direction the Trump administration wanted them to. They need to play this game, I guess, not to lose millions of dollars in federal research dollars. Then the Trump administration requested information on hiring decisions, wanted to examine admissions decisions and audit the student body, faculty, and staff. Harvard was being bullied on illegal grounds. And they saw how Columbia tried to negotiate and how the Trump administration kept moving their targets. It's not a battle Harvard wanted, but Garber decided to be firm and that they would not comply, and they ended up suing the Trump administration. Now, I don't know if Garber is really all that courageous. He was just trying to take the path of least resistance and preserve the institution he was in charge of. He was just doing his job. And maybe that is enough. Unitarian Universalism asks of us to go beyond making business decisions and to live out our highest ideals. Now, I know we can't all be moral titans, we can't all be Olympia Brown, but we can make our world more beautiful and freer by being courageous. It takes some sacrifice and, yes, some failure. We won't always get immediate results, but we can always rejoice in the fact that we are called by this mystery which ever lives and ever loves. Recently, a couple weeks ago, in the Beyond the Binary conference, we had a workshop about how to confront transphobia in our daily lives. And within a week of that workshop, I met someone who I assumed was a liberal, and he started talking about Maine's governor unnecessarily waging a battle with the Trump administration over trans athletes. My body got tense. I didn't say a thing. I changed the topic. I didn't want to get all preachy. I just wanted a normal conversation. I guess I could have said, you know, it's pretty complicated. It's not a black and white issue. When did the trans athlete person transition? What are their hormone levels? But I didn't say any of that. Perhaps moral courage depends on the state of minds we have. If we are stressed and preoccupied, we won't be courageous. If I would have had a bad weekend in Philadelphia, maybe I would have ignored and deferred like the Canadian bagpiper. Or maybe other passengers and him aren't accountable to a community that reminds them every week to live out their values. From sexual harassment to deporting without due process, we can say, this won't affect me. I don't need to get wrapped up in this. I'm fine. Individualism is a deep source of cowardice. Sometimes we say we don't care what other people think, but the bottom line is we are neurobiologically evolved for connection and care. We do care about others and what they think, and we all have an innate motherly instinct. Let's never deny our connection to each other, but embrace it. In the airspace high above New York State, I was safe. The talkative drunk went through the metal detector. I knew he had no gun or knife. He was so inebriated, he wouldn't cause me any harm. I'm sure I calculated this all before I spoke. I was just doing my job as a Unitarian Universalist. What grounded Olympia Brown? What grounded her and gave her the courage to use her voice in the face of so much opposition? What triggers in us the I can no longer remain silent feeling? We may use different symbols to get at this moral abyss of courage. Being part of a larger mother, attuned to the sacred, situated in spirit, experiencing the purple strips of cloud after sunset, feeling small and young in a grove of white pine. We know everyone, everywhere, should feel the freedom of saving love. The world needs our courageous voices. So may it be, and amen.